Welcome to Back to Back. Talk to us.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Back to Back. I'm Darryl Wood.
And I'm Gerald Smith. An increasing amount of business, education, and communication is taking place over the internet. Even though Americans are embracing the information revolution in growing numbers, the data show that white households are twice as likely to own computers as black or Hispanic households. It's a development the government refers to as the digital divide. President Clinton wants to bridge the gap with $300 million in government spending to wire urban and rural areas for internet access.
Professor Paul Resnick says the gap in computer and internet access could lead to problems for blacks and Hispanics in the future. Government intervention, says Professor Resnick, is warranted. Meanwhile, Tim O'Brien, Detroit News editorialist and executive director for the Libertarian Party of Michigan, says the digital divide is not a real problem. Mr. O'Brien adds the free enterprise system can correct and compensate for the disparity in computer ownership and online access. Well, what do you think? Do you own a computer? Do you have internet access? Dial us, 313-872-4040, and join the conversation. I'm going to throw the first question to Tim O'Brien. Tim, you'd look like a pretty bad guy if you said this isn't a good idea for most American citizens who can't afford to be online and connected. What's wrong with everyone having internet access?
Oh, there's absolutely nothing wrong with everyone having internet access, and everyone will very shortly. There's a very recent study out that projects that by, I believe it's 2005, 91% of American households will be wired to the internet. And there's no reason at all why we shouldn't all be wired, and we certainly all will be very soon. And to the degree I think that government gets involved in this, it's going to slow the process down. The explosive growth of the internet has happened entirely in the private sector. And now suddenly the government's coming along going, oh, there's this terrible problem, we need to fix this. The fact of the matter is the only thing they need to do is justify their own existence by intervening and creating a problem where there isn't one.
Professor Paul Resnick, is it realistic to say that because blacks and Hispanics don't have computers and internet access to the same degree that their white counterparts have it, they'll be left behind or fall through the net?
Yes, I think to the extent that people don't have access, it's going to make a big difference in our information society. And I'd really separate out two pieces. There's the access. Do you have a computer? Is it connected to the internet? Or can you get to one at work or at school or somewhere that is? That's one piece, just the access. And then what do you know how to do with it? That's an even bigger problem, I think.
Let me get Mr. O'Brien back into this, and I totally disagree with him with respect to the ability for people to, in fact, have access, and certainly there is, I would say, a responsibility on the part of the public sector to, in fact, at least serve as a catalyst to ensure that those who have not will have access to the information superhighway. I'd like to quote from an article written by Lee Hubbard in his article, which states, is the digital divide a black thing? He says that certainly the latest numbers on technologies used show that the digital divide cuts many ways. He says here, instead of showing a predictable black-white gap, technology reveals that Asian Americans, not whites, have the highest internet and computer use. Mm-hmm. And while blacks at most income levels lag behind whites and Asians, it's Latinos, not blacks, who are at least likely to be wired. But no one's worrying about this divide between the Asian and Latinos. What do we need to do in order to ensure that schools that I visit all the time who don't have books, much less a computer, come up to speed to those affluent neighborhoods who in fact have computer access?
Well, for starters, I think the first thing that we need to establish here is that affluent school districts are going to have not only better schools, they're going to have better teachers, better buildings, better computers, better books.
Right.
I mean, what knowledge do we gain? What is conveyed by the idea that the affluent have better computers? Of course they have better computers.
But how do we level the playing field between those who have the affluent neighborhoods with, or schools with the resources?
The playing field is being leveled, and in fact, this digital divide study is actually very disingenuous. The fact of the matter is that the numbers that are being thrown out here, that the gap is widening, are deceptive, because they start with a larger pie and a larger piece of that pie, and then compare the two. First of all, they're comparing 1994 to 1998. All right, 1998 is at least a generation ago on computers, and then they're comparing it to 1994, which in computer terms is like the Middle Ages.
Well,
the fact of the matter is that the actual black, you can use these exact same numbers. Let's assume these numbers are good. The fact of the matter is that from 1994 to 1998, white ownership of computers increased 72%, while black ownership increased 125%. In those same years, in 1994, white households were 2.6 times more likely to have a computer. Today, it's down to only 2.0
yeah, but the gap is widening between high and low income people, as you reflecting those stats right now, by at least 25%.
But the rate of increase is in favor of the minorities.
I'd like to take you to a couple of schools or a number of schools and let you see what they don't have relative to the internet access.
Professor Paul Resnick, you have a comment.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on this issue of digital divide versus other divides. And yes, there are disparities between the rich and the poor schools already on other dimensions. I think there's a special reason we should care about the digital divide, because it sort of compounds privilege. If you have access to information and information technology, you will be able to advance in education, in the job market. You will be able to participate in our political system in a different way than if you don't have it. So it's not just like some people have a fancy car and some people have a not so fancy car. With access to technology, there's a compounding of privileges. The people who have the access to technology are going to keep getting farther and farther ahead in our society.
Well, that's my point.
The question becomes, who has access to the technology, which is what the whole digital divide discussion is about. Who has access, how much access do they have, and what do we need to level the playing field, as it were? The president believes that $380 million in increased government spending will allow us to put computer centers in communities, wire more schools, create more opportunity for people, not only educationally but economically, simply because we put computers in communities. Is it safe to assume, or even fair and logical to assume, Professor Resnick, that because we put computers in a community or in a school, that it's going to, as Ronald Reagan said at one time, lift all boats with the rising tide?
I think it's the first step, but it's not enough. Because we know of lots of schools where you go in, and maybe you've seen some of these schools, you walk in, they have a computer room, and it's locked. Or there's no teachers who know how to...
Or there's only one computer for an entire class.
Well, in some cases, there just aren't enough computers. But in other cases, they're putting technology centers in, but they don't have all the human resources that need to go to making good use of those.
Well, Governor Engler, this week, speaking to the Economic Club of Detroit, wants to put out a plan that's going to help close the gap between what's in a classroom, what's in a community, and who knows how to use it.
And is he funding that initiative, Darryl?
Well, I think Tim O'Brien will have something to say about how the initiative gets funded, but nonetheless, what he proposes is that to close the digital divide, and Tim O'Brien, the governor, acknowledges that the digital divide is a real problem. As Paul Resnick has pointed out and thinks it's a real problem, Governor Engler seems to fall down on that side of the issue and says, I'm going to address that issue in Michigan by allowing people to have not only more online access at schools, take advanced placement tests, and put 90,000 teachers into computer training and computer access and internet access mode, but I'm also going to create virtual high school. So obviously the governor believes it's a real problem that government must help resolve.
I'm not in the slightest surprised, and to me that just absolutely underscores our entire position here. You know who is really pushing this? Politicians. Politicians who need to create one crisis after another, because otherwise they have no reason to exist. They are essentially leeches on society, constantly coming up with new programs, new needs, new boogeyman to go chasing after, and it doesn't matter whether they're Republicans or Democrats.
Or Libertarians.
No, libertarians would not do this. Libertarians would
But you
confine
are a
government.
political party, though, in the political process,
Yes,
so,
we
okay.
are. Yes,
All right.
we are.
And hold that thought. I want to get a phone call in here before we go to break. Natasha
Sure.
from West Bloomfield is watching and has a question and or comment. Natasha, welcome to Back to Back.
Hi, how are you?
Well, thank you.
I just like to say that I hope that this whole topic of digital division is stopped right now, because I think that this discussion actually puts blacks and Hispanics in a bad light, instead of realizing that blacks will find a way to get computers. I mean, you can now you can get on a computer by going to the library, by going to community schools, and just as our parents fought and made sure that we had certain things like schools and books and those type of things a long time ago, they'll also be able to do the same thing now.
So are you saying, in a sense, that it's more of a class issue than a race or ethnic issue?
I hope it dies. I hope this whole subject right here dies, because
So do I.
if someone can pay for a person to go to ballet or go to take basketball lessons or whatever, you can rent a computer nowadays. You don't need
But
to.
for those families who can't even afford bus fare to go to school, how can you reconcile that?
That they can't afford bus fare?
Exactly.
Well,
Poor
you can actually go
students.
to your public library.
Doesn't
now,
matter what color they are.
But you can access a computer by going to your public library.
And
What
actually,
about that?
Libraries are great places, and so are the community centers, and they're an important part of the solution to the
And
digital
And
divide.
they were, in fact, entirely left out of the study upon which we are relying here with this digital divide thing. They measured only personal computers in homes. They did not even take into account computers being available at work or in school, which is another way that they've twisted the facts. in this
All
whole
right,
thing.
gents, we're going to take a break right now. This conversation will continue when we come back.
Keep those calls coming at 313-872-4040. You're watching Back to Back on Detroit Public Television. We're back in 2 minutes.
A mouthful of this water can kill you, yet people take baths in it. Rich civilizations have vanished without explanation. Everything gets caked with salt. Temperatures soar to 120 degrees, but nobody gets a sunburn. And what is an African ibex doing in the Middle East? Then there's sinkholes,
It's a very big problem.
human bones,
Leg bones.
and an old waterfront restaurant that is now riddled with bullets and over a mile from shore. What on earth is going on here? Somewhere in this haunting landscape are the answers. Unravel the contradictions and mysteries of the Dead Sea, a Naked Planet special.
Tuesday evening at 8.
It was great hearing from over 10,000 of you, our viewers, during the March Pledge Drive. It's gratifying to know how much you love the programs of Detroit Public Television. If you've received one of these pledge slips in your home, please consider this a friendly but urgent reminder to send in your check. Pledges are great, but your dollars are what buy the programs for you and your family. Thanks to everyone who called in. It's our pleasure to turn your payments into the quality programming you see on Detroit Public TV.
Is life sacred?
Assisted suicide,
Ethnic cleansing,
organ donation,
school prayer,
cloning.
On our persecution watch,
or today's news in a different light.
Watch Religion and Ethics News Weekly.
1:30 p.m. Sunday.
thanks for tuning in. This is Back to Back. Our guests are Professor Paul Resnick from the University of Michigan and Libertarian Party Executive Director Tim O'Brien. We're discussing the digital divide. Call with your questions or comments to 313 872-4040.
We
Gerald?
want Professor Paul Resnick to pick up the point that Natasha was making. You had some comments.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, one thing about where the facts are, which is there is a racial divide that even controlling for income and educational level, it turns out that whites are using computers and the internet more than blacks are. So people of the same income, different races, there tends to be a difference. Now, maybe different in Natasha's family.
Yeah.
She may be getting that.
But it's a microcosm of society when you look at it.
But it does indicate or seem to show that even when blacks have the opportunity or option to have equal access, they are not accessing the net.
It's interesting, too, that when one reaches a threshold of over $90,000 a year in disposable income, it's been said that African Americans use the internet more than white households.
Well, let me throw in one more number at the risk of just confusing everyone.
Yeah, right.
The $75,000 income threshold between black and white households, the government data seem to indicate that the divide disappears, Tim O'Brien.
I want to strongly support and agree with Natasha. I think she's absolutely right. I think this is very condescending to suggest that blacks aren't going to be able to join in this revolution and that there's something racial. It's almost like a bell curve kind of argument or something. I don't understand this. It is very condescending to me to suggest that for some reason blacks as a race or Hispanics or anyone, is not capable and need government help in order to be able to participate. That's just offensive.
I think what we're talking about here, Tim, is leveling the playing field of opportunity. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a handout. We're not talking about someone just coming up to you summarily and giving you something. I think what we're talking about here is providing one with an opportunity. And if the playing field is not, in fact, leveled, then you're going to have a crisis and a plethora of problems like this. And it's going to continue to widen as opposed to narrowing.
The market will level that playing field. It already has. Computers that cost thousands of dollars only a few years ago now go for hundreds of dollars. Internet access is available for free if you're willing to put up with the little banner ads. If you don't, $10 a month you can get on the internet. Now, the fact of the matter is that technology spreads through society from the prosperous to the middle class to the more impoverished. It's inevitable. I don't understand why everyone should be surprised that it would be any different with computers. Nowadays, 98% of households have color TVs. 94% of households have telephones. It didn't start that way, and the computer revolution is happening even more quickly.
Let's take a phone call now. Rod from Detroit is online. Rod, welcome to the program. Your question or comment for our guests.
Oh, well, thank you. My question or comment is, I'm on a fixed income. I get like $7,000 a year. I've had computer for 5 years, and I've been on the internet for 3. And I really don't understand why anyone who doesn't want a computer, that wants a computer and wants to be on the internet isn't.
Neither do I.
Rod, thanks a lot for your telephone call. Thanks for watching. Professor Resnick, you say that government involvement in wiring the country, urban and rural areas, as the president proposes, is a good thing, perhaps a necessary thing. But what price might we pay for having the government in charge of computer learning in city and suburb?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as putting the government in charge. The government has certain roles to push things along. Now, one analogy that might be useful is to think about what's happened with telephone service. We have not universal service, but we have 94% of households in America have telephone service. Part of the reason for that is that we have subsidies. And we have a universal service fund, and we've decided that it's important to our society, and I think there's 2 reasons for wanting this. One is kind of an individual fairness argument, and the other is that it's better for society. It's actually better for me if other people are all connected to a communication medium that we're all using.
Well, if the government gets involved in this, I hope you like it, because you're going to have it forever. We are just now, we finally have a bill before Congress to finally repeal the 3% tax on telephones to pay for the Spanish-American War. Okay, this has been on for 100 years. So if you want to invite the government to get involved with the internet, I hope you like them there, because you're never going to get rid of them.
All right, let me get back into this conversation for a second here. Let's look at a partnership between the government and the private sector. I work for a corporation, a cable system, that is currently has an initiative to, in fact, install cable modems in all public, private, and libraries. So if you look at that, with government serving as a catalyst, not as Darryl might have asked Professor Resnick, as the leader, that puts a different spin on it, because now you're looking at a partnership. There's a responsibility on the part of the government to do this. There's a responsibility on the part of the private sector to do their part, or even nonprofit organizations do their part in order to, again, allegedly bridge this digital divide. So I think it's a partnership approach, a public-private partnership approach, not one leading the other, but certainly there's a self-initiative involved in this process as well.
We didn't need the government as a catalyst to get the internet started, did we? It seemed to have gotten to where it is right now very nicely.
But obviously there's other people think that we need government to regulate. And that's another key issue.
Well, before we take on too much, and before we get to Professor Resnick's next question, let's take a call from Anita, who's watching in Dearborn. Anita, thanks for calling. Your question or comment?
Thank you very much for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I'm just sitting here flabbergasted that everybody's really upset about the leveling the playing field. We have a bigger problem. The children can't read or write or do arithmetic, and now we're going to take teachers out of the classroom and pay zillions of dollars to teach them computers. Why don't we teach them better ways of teaching our children?
What we ought to do is spend the money on McGuffey readers.
Say that again?
What we should do is spend the money on McGuffey readers and teach the kids to read.
Absolutely, and we are disenfranchising the people to go to computers where they don't talk to anybody, they look at a screen. I'm sorry. Talking one-on-one and teaching children is much more important than computers. Computers are out there, and they will come along just like having a television in every house. It will come, and the children will learn faster, and they're sponges waiting to have this information, but we can't get enough teachers to teach the basics. That's where we need to do it. Every time we get the government involved in anything, it costs twice as much, and it works half as many times. The government doesn't know how to do it, and every time they get too much money, instead of giving it back to people, they put it in a rainy day thing up in Lansing or in Washington instead of using the money properly. Let's teach children the basics so that there is a level field where everybody can read and write and do arithmetic.
Anita, thanks very much for your call. Professor Resnick, your response. If Johnny can't read, Johnny's sure not going to be able to compute.
I agree. If Johnny can't read, he's not going to be able to compute. But what's happened is we've just raised the bar in the last 20 years in American society. We've raised the bar of what it means to be literate. It used to be that reading and arithmetic was enough. I was going to get you a job. I was going to let you be a full participant in the political process. I was going to let you be in all kinds of social activities and civic activities. And that's changing. So you're going to need to read, but you're going to need to be able to publish information, broker information, so figure out who you want to pass it on to. You're going to need to be able to find information. It's it's the new literacy of the 21st century.
Professor Resnick, Mayor Dennis Archer, Mayor of the City of Detroit, convened a conference downtown last month called Deleting the Digital Divide. And he says the issue that he's confronted with is access and training. You mentioned access a little bit earlier in your discussion. He says that access and training are distributed unevenly and that the gap separating the knows and the knows not is impeding youth in urban areas, thus preventing them, I should say, from, again, competing effectively and leveling this playing field. Your comments on that? You agree with that?
I agree with that, and I think that's where we have to start from. There's going to be room for a lot of discussion about exactly what role for government versus the private sector versus our semi-public institutions, and I'm willing to have lots of debates on that, but I think we have to start from the point that as a society, we care about leveling this playing field.
You know what? I want to take one more phone call in the waning seconds of this program. Marion from Detroit, you're on back-to-back. You have about 20 seconds. Your question, please.
Oh, is this me, Marjorie?
Marjorie, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marjorie.
Yes. The organizations in the city are trying to provide computers available to the students as well as their parents. However, the libraries only have a few. The community centers in most urban neighborhoods have none. And Communities in Schools, along with Rebuilding Communities Initiative, has been working, especially on the east side, in getting this information to children. And as the lady from Dearborn says, if they cannot read, they cannot have access to the computer because you must read to be online.
Marjorie, thanks a lot for your call. Tim, 10 seconds. Your final thought.
We want to solve this problem. I'll tell you how to do it. Break the government monopoly on the school system. That will do much more to raise the level of everybody than screwing around with the internet and with the computer system.
Paul Resnick, 10 seconds. Government involvement with limits. What kind of limits?
Well, you have to figure out what's the appropriate role for government as catalyst, and in some cases as regulator, in some cases providing subsidies.
All right, gentlemen, thanks a lot for those comments. For show information, view our webpage at dptv.org and click the back-to-back link. If you'd like more information on the facts and figures concerning the digital divide, point your browser to www.digitaldivide, that's one word, .gov.
Also, give us your feedback at 313-876-8323. That number again is 313-876-8323. This show we air Sunday at 11:30 a.m. on Detroit Public Television. I'm Gerald Smith.
I'm Darryl Wood. We'll see you next time.
Local broadcast of this program is made possible in part by the Michigan Chronicle, the award-winning African-American newspaper serving Michigan for over 60 years. The Michigan Chronicle, news from a different perspective.